Hey friend, welcome into a fiction-focused bonus episode with my very best friends, Lisa Wood and Maria Jessup, and our special guest, Christy-award-winning author, Amanda Cox. You guys, we loved this book and Amanda so much. The novel we're talking about is The Secret Keepers of Old Depot Groceries, and it is a treasure. When we did the live interview with Amanda, several of the ladies watching shared the same sentiment that for them, the story and Amanda's writing is just so good. I hope you'll love listening to Amanda talk about secrets in relationships, how she decides how much Jesus to put into her stories, and how God used the death of her bees, she's a beekeeper, to teach her about his faithfulness in her writing. Let's listen in. Good evening, Steady On community, and welcome to Virtual Book Club Spring Edition. I'm so delighted that you are here, or if you happen to be watching this later or listening to the podcast later, we are just delighted to welcome Amanda Cox as our guest for the Spring Edition of the Virtual Book Club. Welcome, Amanda, to the Steady On community.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to get to chat with you all.
We're so excited to chat with you. I really loved this book. And as you know, and our anybody that's been watching very long knows that we've been reading books together for a long time, getting longer all the time. But I just love getting into a story that it just teaches me something about myself. It teaches me something about relationships. And I felt like this book was just like checking all the boxes, Amanda. So I'm just really excited. So just start us off with like sorry.
Is the name of the book,
of the keepers of the old grocery.
We're going to talk about this book of Amanda's, The Secret Keepers of Old Depot Grocery. And you know what? And here's the funny, I used to work in a grocery store. And so I couldn't get this little rural grocery store. And so I just like had that little, that I could smell it and stocked. And I worked, okay, I'm going to date myself before I even start. I worked in the grocery store at a time when baby food still came in small glass jars. Okay, anybody? And I would like on Saturdays be stocking and lining up, facing, the stuff. And every once in a while one would fall on the floor and make a big old mess. But I could see myself doing that as you were describing the grocery store. But start us off by just kind of giving us the overview of the story. When someone says, hey, what is this book about? What do you tell them?
It's always such a challenge for an author to explain. We've written this whole long thing to like bring it down to a little bit, but I always tell people that it's about 3 generations of women whose lives have gotten wrapped around in various ways this small town grocery store. And it's a trio of a grandmother, a mother, and a daughter. And the youngest, Sarah, she's been through a really trying circumstance. And she, in a lot of ways, sees her trying circumstance as an escape and an opportunity to start over for a life that she wanted, to return to her hometown and work in the family grocery store alongside her grandmother and her mother. But when she returns back, it seems like the store is going to have to close. And her mother she's always felt the push from her mother to leave. She feels this push now to close the store while her grandmother is really hanging on tight. So she's a little bit caught in the middle of the two of those. But at the heart of it, it's a story about mothers and daughters and the dynamic that exists between mothers and daughters. There's a unique dynamic between mothers and sons, and there's a unique dynamic between mothers and daughters. And the way that we pass things down from grandmother to daughter. Some things are like really intentional, these legacies that we leave behind. And then some things are not so intentional that kind of arise.
So you have us on this because of the 4 of us here in these boxes. You're the only one that mothers a daughter. Mm-hmm. And so to whatever degree you're comfortable, what are some things that mothering a daughter has been different in your parenting than mothering your sons? Would you be willing to share? Yeah.
And my daughter is a really big reason that I ended up focusing on mother-daughter relationships. Mm-hmm. I was always, as a kid, I was kind of like daddy's girl. And so like my mom's wonderful. I love my mom. She's amazing. So it's just like as a kid, that's kind of like how I was always trying to follow my dad around and figure out my dad's world. But my daughter is very different in that she has always been 100% mama's girl. And so the reason that I ended up focusing on mother-daughter relationships for this book, like part of the inspiration, it came from watching my daughter when she was a toddler. And I started to notice ways that she would mimic me. Whether it was my tone and the way that I was talking to, her and her brothers, I would catch her with that same tone. And sometimes I'd be like, oh, that's so sweet. And then sometimes I'd be like, oh, that.
Please tell me I don't sound like that, right? Yeah.
Like, oh, I just heard myself out of the voice of a little toddler voice. And I'm just like, oh dear. And so it really got me thinking about the things that we pass on unintentionally. And I just started to notice she's just always been a really kind of intuitive kid who just really pays attention to interactions between people. I don't know if everybody's kid is like that, but that's just my experience with her. And I just noticed that she was figuring out what it meant to be a woman in the world from watching me. And I'm just like, ooh, that is, that's a lot. That's heavy. And she is building these early, forming these ideas of what it means to be a woman in this world. And so it got me to thinking when I was writing the story. So the store itself is really important to me. I grew up around a family store, and my grandmother owned a store. And so when I wanted to bring the store to life, and then pairing with that was that mother-daughter relationship, and thinking about the things that I wanted to pass on to my daughter, the things I might be passing on unintentionally.
Yeah, I love that.
Together.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. I really did experience the store as one of the characters you said brought it to life. And I thought that really the store in the book is its own character for sure. Yeah. And I thought it was interesting, how about you ladies, but how like Glorianne's relationship with her mother was, I would call traumatic even, that relationship. And yet it's wonderful to be able to see someone want to be a good mother when that's not what was modeled. Exactly. I think. Yeah. Yeah. And that gave me a lot of hope, I think, too. And to see that continually grow stronger in the generations, I think that desire to mother well, imperfectly, but well. Right. Yeah. So.
Yeah. I thought the women were independent on their own as well. I mean, they seemed very strong, put it that way. I thought.
I think so too. Yeah. So, well, okay. So as the title suggests, secret keeping is a big, it's a common thread in the book. So how does secret keeping impact the characters of the book? And I'm wondering why that was like an important thing for you to write about, but.
Yeah, so it definitely plays a huge role in the story. Sometimes we hear the word secret and it almost sounds like a cute word, a little bit mysterious, something you kind of whisper, but it can kind of be synonymous with lies a lot of times. There are innocent, obviously, but in the case of this book, it's a false truth that is presented that has a huge impact. I think sometimes we have the perception that, or at least this was the heritage that Glorianne had was, if this is hidden, it won't hurt anyone. But if it comes out, it will hurt everyone and mess everything up. So we have this idea of like, we can compartmentalize. We're like, okay, we'll take this little secret and we'll put it in a box and it really won't affect anything else. But the problem is that when there are things in our life that there's a source of like guilt or shame or pain, it's going to impact the way that we interact with other people. And so then if they don't have the full information, they don't have the full context, they're operating only on partial information. And we as human beings, we have that tendency to take our perceptions and fill in the blanks with our best guesses of what's going on. And that has a really huge impact on Rosemary, where an example of that is she notices a difference between the way her mother interacts with her versus her sister. And because she does not have the full information, she fills that in with like why that is. And again, that secret impacts Rosemary in the way that she sees her world and the perception of her world. And that has an overflowing impact onto her daughter. And so this little tiny thing is actually like the spidering tendrils that have latched onto a lot of areas. And I think that's it can be very true of life. And it's been interesting. Go ahead.
Okay. No, you go.
And it's been interesting after the book has been out, getting some feedback from other like women who were raised in the South, and they're like, yes, this is my experience. And so I hadn't necessarily thought of it as being a Southern experience. But there have been women who are like, yes, this is how, I don't live in the South anymore, but this was kind of like, there were certain things that were not to be talked about, that they just really related to. And I found that interesting.
Yeah. It makes me think of two things. And the first is like, I think also we see like with Rosemary, that idea of secret, or the way that her mother treated her sister different, something like when we make up that story, it not only affects the relationship between mother and daughter, but between sister and sister, right? Like, and even between like Rosemary and her husband, like there's this hint of like, something's not quite right. And I'm not at peace with that in myself. And it comes out in other relationships, as we kind of continue to, as you say, fill in the gaps in our own mind and make up that story. And the other thing that came to mind as you were talking was, I think so often if we have a little secret, right? If we have a little something that we actually think that we are protecting the person, or we're doing it in love. And we really don't realize, I think, when most things come to light at some point, do they not? I mean, I think probably not everything, but I mean, a lot of things eventually come to light. And what it does then is it casts doubt on everything else, right? What else didn't you tell me? Or what else didn't I know? Or why didn't you believe I was strong enough to handle this? Or, oh, if I had known this so many different things would have, and I think we do it sometimes out of protection, and yet it doesn't feel like that, I think, most of the time to the other person. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. What kind of secrets do you ladies have? Talk to me more about the women who said that, like in the South, like, because did you feel like, were you getting the impression that somehow like that Southern culture is more secretive? I don't know. Talk about that just a little bit more.
Yeah, and I mean, it's kind of like I said, it's kind of something like Southern culture is sometimes, when you're right there in front of it, you don't necessarily you just have a different view and a different perspective. But there was one reader who was talking to me, and she hadn't read it yet. She's like, I've been kind of like hesitant to read it because she's like, I feel like that's going to hit home in a way that is uncomfortable. But then I was at a reader event, and the other readers around were like, no, read it. It's hopeful. Like, it gives you hope for even though there are painful things because of secrets kept, there is hope that there are better ways there's healing that can occur. So even if it does maybe touch a nerve a little bit, the whole gist of the book is to point you in a hopeful direction.
Yeah.
And I recently had like a small book club that is in Chattanooga. And so I got to meet with them face to face. And one of the ladies there shared her story, and it was so similar to Gloria Ann's story.
Really?
And you could just hear the pain and the anguish that she felt, but like reading the book, she felt seen. She was like, she's like, years have passed and I'm not there anymore. So it's not that reading it was bringing up bad feelings necessarily, but it was just feeling seen, that she, someone saw her in her hidden pain.
Yeah. And things that gave you guys hope. I was going to say, the thing that I thought was, for me anyway, the most hopeful was when things sort of began to come apart, they actually were able to be put back together. And I think I attribute that to, they kept talking. Like, they kept talking, and they kept trying to, nobody like ran away very far for very long. And I think that's what we so often, I think we're so quick to write people off sometimes, or, well, now I can't trust you at all, or this can't be fixed, or whatever. And I found so much hope in a family that would say, I love you. I'm sorry. I'm not leaving. I don't want you to leave. Just these basic, like, we can still fix this, or we can work through it, or there's a future beyond this. And I found so much hope in that, Amanda. And I was just really grateful for a family that just says, we just figure out what's next from this place we are. Yeah. Yeah. What about you, ladies? Something that was like hopeful or encouraging to you as you read it?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing without giving so much away, but the way that you brought them together through communication, I agree, Angie, was really powerful. But yet also taking time to each deal with their own, so that they could come back to the greater good
instead of stuffing it. Is that what you mean? Like,
yes.
Yeah.
Like finally, they just had to, yeah. So that was really, really well written, and
So Lisa is watching. I just want to say a different Lisa is watching. She says, I so enjoyed this book. I felt as if I were right there in the store. Isn't that great? That's so me too, Lisa. I shared it with my mom who's 92 and she enjoyed it too. So yeah, thanks for watching and for reading. So yeah, love that feedback. What about you, Lisa? Something that you found that was just like hopeful or encouraging?
Well, yeah, the same thing kind of that Maria said. I always think of soap operas, and I'm always thinking if they would just communicate. It's been years since I've watched one, but they would just communicate. And so you kind of had that angst for a while, but they did. It's like you said, Angie, they did maintain relationship. It wasn't just, fractured. But something that I enjoyed was the men in their lives and the roles that they played, encouraging. They push them a little bit, but they're good men. It just seemed like to me they were good men. And I really appreciated that, because sometimes you'll have weak men or weak bashing or whatever it is, but I thought that they were really encouraging to their significant others and really helped that the mother-daughter relationships work and encourage them.
Yeah. I thought they were important. Yeah. I loved it.
I love this book.
Yeah. So, I thought one of the most important parts of the book for me anyway, was that when Jessamine challenges Rosemary by telling her she'll never have the full life she's craving until she accepts the life she has. I don't remember specifically what was going on when that was happening in the book, but I remember that like quote or that sentiment. And I just wonder, does that stand out to you? I guess I just imagine that it does, but why was that an important thing for you to include?
I think part of it, my background is in counseling. And so I've spent a lot of time sitting with people, whether it's a counseling relationship or it's been more of a mentor type relationship. More recently, it's been more of a mentor type relationship. And there's been young women in my life, and they would have this perception of like, well, if I can just get into this specific academic program, if I can just get here, if I can just get there, and just sitting with them and being like, that would be wonderful, but you still take you with you wherever you go. And that struggle of if we can't find contentment with where we are, with who God created us to be, with the place that God has put us for a season. Because, I believe that God is a God who does it. He's not a wasteful God. And so whatever season that we're in, even if it's not ideal, even if it's not the way that we wanted our story to go, there is something of value that can be found there when we make that connection with him. And if we cannot find that contentment with him, wherever we are, it's going to transport to the next place. And so sometimes it would happen that way where they would be on to the next place. And then I hadn't talked to them for a while and they would call me up and they're like, I need to talk. And so we would chat and I'm trying to gently, I'm like, do you hear that we're repeating the same new circumstance, similar feelings, that same uncomfortable feeling that you have, where it's the next thing is where the happiness is going to come from. That's not the source. We can find that source with finding contentment with God and learning from whatever season we're in. There's space for growth, and I've experienced that in my own life as well. And it's just a passion of mine is to find whatever God wants to teach me in whatever moment I'm in, whether it's the mountains or the valleys.
The enemy is so persistent in my life by trying to convince me to romanticize the life I don't have, right? Like if you just, my Aunt Twyla used to have this huge precious moments collection. And one of the ones that I was always drawn to was a little boy with a lawnmower looking over the fence on the other side. And it said at the bottom, the grass may be greener, but it's just as hard to mow. And I'm like, yes, that's what you're talking about. I think that comes to mind as you're talking, because I'm like, yes, it does look pretty over there, but you still have to work or do, and you do take yourself with you. And the things that make you lack contentment in this place are the same things that will encourage you to not be content in the new place. And there will be some things that are better and there will be some things that aren't. So Joyce
new responsibilities.
Yes, exactly. And there are people everywhere.
Exactly.
Enough said.
Joyce is also watching tonight. Hello, Joyce.
Hi,
and
Joyce.
She says, wonderful book. So enjoyed. And so, yes, absolutely. So I want to ask you a question that I ask a lot of the authors. We ask this a lot of the authors. And that is, I'm curious about your opinion on what makes fiction Christian, because this always happens, right? Like a book that will get like different reviews, and one person will say, this isn't a Christian book, there's not enough Jesus in here. And then somebody else will be like, this book has too much, like the same book, I think it's really hard right now for I think it's hard to know how much Jesus to put in the book, I guess, in order to, so what are your thoughts on that, or how do you decide, or would you talk about that for just a minute?
Yeah, sure. It is a challenging place to be. I got to learn on this particular book, like those two different ends of the spectrum. And so as an author, sometimes you're just like, what do you want?
What do you want? Yeah.
But the fact is every reader is different. And the way that I personally approach it is it depends on how much the spiritual thread and how prominent like it plays as far as like an overt spiritual message depends on the characters themselves, because I'm very character driven. And every person on this planet is a little bit different, right? And the way they see the world. Some people like spirituality is everywhere. Some people are really just down to earth and they like spirituality is a part of their life, but they just experience it in a different way. So when I'm trying to formulate stories, I try to think about who that character is and what they need to grow. And just as I guess the way that I think about it, because it can be challenging as an author, because you're just like, I'm trying to make a wide range of people happy with my book. And that's not necessarily like that old saying, if you try to make everybody happy, no one's going to be happy. The way that I think about it is that books are meant for different people for different purposes. And so for me, Christian fiction, does it come from a worldview, a biblical worldview? Does it have content in it, even if the message is maybe more symbolic, while another book may be more overt? If you look at the themes within the book, does it point to a biblical worldview? And because there's some people who maybe they pick up a book and it might not have as overt content, but is pointing them towards the love of Jesus. In a way that they might not be open to picking up another book that has a more overt message. So different books for different people. And that's the way I choose to look at it. There are going to be there are people who picked up this book and they did not see the spirituality in it. And then there were other people like, I was deeply moved by the spirituality that was there. And it's like, well, that book was meant for you. And maybe someone else didn't experience that. And sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm sad that you didn't like feel that because that might have been a blessing to you, but maybe this book was not the book for you. Someone else's book is the book that maybe will impact you more deeply. So for me, I try not to insert it into the book, but I try to let it develop naturally as I'm writing. And I think that, with my titles, some have more of an overt focus there, and some a little less.
Yeah. No, thank you for just being willing to share your heart around that, because I think it would be really challenging. I really do. And I think that it's fairly obvious sometimes when you read a book and there's not that much spirituality in it, but then there's like this like Jesus or conversion scene kind of like, almost towards the end that just feels like it must be in there or something. I'm like, I don't think that's what they would do at this point, actually, it doesn't feel quite right. And I'm like, so I'm always glad when that's not what happens, but it's always very interesting to me, because I think as an author, I think it's very brave to let the story unfold and decide how spiritual maybe your characters are or are not, and where they are in their own faith walk. Maria has something to add.
That being said, Clarence is my favorite character.
There are some elements of his character that are very much intentionally there.
Yeah, that's right.
A little bit of a picture.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I think, for those who are looking for that, you can see it. It's evident. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. So, well, just let us into your life a little bit. Where's God working in your life right now? What's bringing you happiness, joy, peace? You said you just came from the ball game. Is that like life-giving or is that life draining?
A little bit. It's a little bit of a mix. I am a homebody introvert. But my kids keep me out and running, and ball season is definitely crazy. It's been a lot of running lately. So yes, it is life-giving because of the fact that I love watching my kids do things that they love to do, and it's a lot of fun. I don't really care like what the score is at the end of the game, but them having a good time is just fun, watching them learn and grow and things like that. I think a big it's kind of a full circle kind of moment that I'm in right now in this season a little bit. About a year ago, I was working on the book that is coming out this August. So, I turn it in about a year ahead of time.
Yes.
And that book was the most difficult thing that I have ever written.
He
The
should have
whole
told the bees. Do I have the
Yes.
right one? Yeah, I'm putting it here
Yeah.
in the comments right now. Yeah, tell us why. I'm curious. Yeah.
So, and there were some elements that I totally didn't fully understand why I was struggling so much. Like in my head, the story played like a symphony, but when I put my hands on the keyboard, it felt like an out of tune child's piano that half the keys are missing. Like it just was not flowing for me. At least that was my perception of it. So just doing, like, I prayed through that book a lot because, like, Lord, you've given me this opportunity to write this book, an opportunity I wasn't sure if I was going to have or not. And just praying through, it's like, you've given me this opportunity. This is your story. I have no idea how this is coming together. And so it was just this struggle to get that story down for whatever reason. I think part of it, I was processing this a couple of days ago. And I think part of it was I keep bees as a hobby. But my bees, the year that I was writing this book, they died over the winter. So they lived through the winter. And so my bees died. And so I had travel plans. So I wasn't able to like get new bees. But those plans ended up getting canceled. So I spent that spring with empty hives. And I'm writing this book about a beekeeper. And so I was processing that because my hives are now full again and I have bees in my hive and I'm just like so excited about those bees in the hive. And I was just like praying about, I'm like, Lord, why does this make me so like just peace and joy of like having those bees in the hive? And it's to the point where the book is getting out early reviews and things like that. And so this book that I prayed through so much is like, it's beginning to be released. And the Lord was just kind of speaking to my heart a little bit of this idea of, when the hives are empty, I am near. And when the hives are full, I am near. And even though you're writing this book and it felt horrible to you, that book was not horrible. That was not the feedback you received when you turn this book in, that you weren't sure you were going to be able to write. Like you didn't need the bees to write this book. And it's really funny because there are themes in that book that are there that match that. And so it's just a really full circle moment for me as far as like the faithfulness of God, of journey, doing something with him, that even though it feels stilted and it doesn't feel beautiful in that time, continuing to just do it with him and the way that it shapes things. So again, it's one of those so it's like I'm getting to see the fruit of labor. And so it's a really nice season to see.
It means a lot to me that you would share that backstory to that. Right. Yeah. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. And I'm very excited about this new book for you, but it's really, it's very touching to hear of what God does so much in the work before the work gets out into the world. Right. Like, for all of us that are creating something, I think there's such there's a wrestling and a getting to know him and a surrender to him in the process. And my guess is a lot of times your books, when they're all done and they're like this, you're like, that's not, I didn't know we were going there, or I didn't know, like, that's not the symphony that I was playing in my mind at first. And yet you can see his faithfulness all through it. And that, when you will testify to his faithfulness and your struggle, we can all are better to be able to see his faithfulness in ours as well. So I just thank you for sharing that with us this evening. What about you, ladies? Anything else you want to add? We're about out of time. Anybody that's watching, if you have a question for Amanda, drop it in here and I'll ask her. Or you ladies, anything else you want to add, ask, say?
No, I added mine before we went live. So
yeah, we do it without the spoilers. No, the character development and coming around to the communication. They were just really big in that book for me. And I just found it a sweet story with a lot of packing a punch to it that I just learned a lot. I loved it. Didn't know I was going to. How about that?
Yeah. I love it when it's always so interesting to me because I would love how other people see it. Cause I think I know what the store looks like. I know what the people looks like. I know what it, does, like, I know, cause it's in here because you just did such a beautiful job of painting the picture for me. And so I love this about reading too, cause I'm quite sure that we could all see it in our mind and it doesn't look anything at all the same. And that's actually perfect. That's the way it should be. Right. Yeah. So this book that we've been talking about tonight, I'll just look and see if anybody else dropped anything. This book we're talking about tonight is The Secret Keepers of Old Depot Grocery. And the new one is The Secret Keepers. No, that's it. He Should Have Told the Bees. And that is out in August. Do I have that right? Yeah.
The end of August.
Pre-orders now. Are pre-orders going on now? Yeah.
Pre-orders are available.
Okay. Awesome. Anywhere else you'd like to call to action? Anything you'd like to send the listeners to do?
Sure. If you want to keep up with me, you can check out my website, amandacoxwrites.com. And that's where you'll see a lot of updates. You'll get to see some of the books that I've written, what they're about, some things like that. If your book clubs are doing books, there are different resources and fun things available. And then if you want to follow me on social media, if you search Amanda Cox Writes, you'll find me. And I like to play around on Instagram a lot.
Yeah, I would say you do really cute videos on Instagram. Yes. Yeah, Instagram is the place I have a feeling that she hangs out. So Amanda, thank you so much again for your time this evening. And thank you, ladies, for watching. And thank you, ladies, for continuing to read with me after all these years. And yeah, one more time, we just really appreciate you, and we loved the book. And until next time, peace.
Thank you.
Thank you, as always, to my dear friends for reading and chatting with me again for another virtual book club edition. And a huge thank you to Amanda Cox for sharing her story and her time. Amanda's books are available wherever books are sold. This book is called The Secret Keepers of Old Depot Grocery, and her new book due out in August is called He Should Have Told the Bees. If you haven't yet, I'd be so grateful if you would follow the podcast on whatever directory you're using to listen. It only takes a second, and it guarantees you'll see new episodes, including these fiction-focused bonus episodes, as soon as they drop. Thank you so much for listening. I pray wherever your day takes you, you are walking in the confident knowledge that you are a beloved, cherished child of God. Peace.